got my finger on the button. I'm watching everything you do, and I won't hesitate to push it. One false move, you're just confused and distracted. You don't know fiction from life.
What's going on, everybody? It's Colin from the Neuro Farm here with you. Tonight on TNF TV, we are featuring a new episode of 30 Minutes of Truth with a special guest joining us. Talented guy, Mr. Dave Mallen from Innovation Station Music is on the program. Back in 2017, Dave opened his new recording facility in Annandale, Virginia, after being in Arlington prior to that. He's been a super active supporter of the DC music community for a long time, and in 2019 won the Whammy Award for Best Recording Studio. So we are very happy to have him on the program this evening to talk about that and all kinds of other things that are going on at Innovation Station. 3, 2, 1, and we are on. So welcome to our program, Dave. Thank you for joining our little program here. I appreciate you taking some time to sit down and talk with us. How are things going?
Oh, thank you for having me. Things are going well, safe and healthy and, doing what I do. So feel pretty fortunate and doing fine. Thanks.
Glad to hear it. So one thing I was curious about, and I referenced this in my introduction earlier, is, so I noticed, and I was aware of this already anyway, but in some of your bio documentation, so in 2019, you received the Whammy Award for Best Recording Studio. And I wondered how you felt about that. Like, what did that, was that gratifying? What did that kind of feel like? What did that mean to you?
It was incredibly gratifying. I don't operate a large studio, and there are institutions that have been around for 30 years, studios that are household names. I started this from very humble beginnings, working out of a bedroom and then growing to a basement in our old townhouse, and then built the Dream Studio starting in 2015, a 3-year process roughly. And to receive that honor, I think speaks to the hard work that I put in, and I think it's more than just the space. I think it's the reaction that my clients have from working in the space and working with me. And I'm never one to toot my horn about anything, but when you get an award like that and that kind of recognition, it definitely, it gives you a shot in the arm. So I felt really good about it, and I was proud for sure.
Belated congratulations on that front then. So
Thank you.
Very, very well deserved. So what's a day in the life like for you at Innovation Station? Pandemic and COVID-19 and social distancing aside, if that weren't going on right now, what would be a typical day for you? What's going on there?
Yeah, so I organize my day generally this way. I wake up and obviously have breakfast and so on. I look to see if I have any emails from clients, sort of get some of the little business things out of the way, make sure that I'm being responsive to people. And then I come down to the studio, which is in my basement, so my commute is fantastic. And then I fire everything up, and I usually have a mixing project or a mastering project of some kind, and I work on that in the mornings. So my mind is fresh, my ears are fresh, and I usually do that for about 90 minutes, take a break because the ears start to get a little wonky after about 90 minutes. And also just in terms of, being creative and staying focused, I think 90 minutes is about the right block of time. Take a break, maybe go upstairs, do something, maybe walk around, come back and do another 90-minute block, have lunch, and then usually I have recording sessions in the afternoons. And that could be, say, just right after lunch, 3-4 hour sessions. Sometimes they run longer. And that'll go until the time that I need to pick my son up from daycare. and then we do the whole nighttime ritual of dinner and bath time and bedtime. So I'm rocking the the studio life plus dadding, and then usually I will do some work after he goes to bed. I'll come back down. Might be some more mixing, might be some business type stuff, or maybe updating the website, things like that. Or I might have some evening sessions if clients are not able to come during the day. Sometimes they have full-time jobs, and we'll do like a 7:30, 7:45 session and go until about 10:30, 11 o'clock. So that's a typical day.
Is it a lot to juggle? I mean, are you kind of spent at the end of the day?
Uh, it depends. There are definitely sessions and mixes that are more demanding for me. And at the end of the day, if I'm under a deadline and I feel like, I'm really pushing to get something done, I'll have a glass of wine and just sort of veg for, another hour. Like I can't just turn it off and go right to bed. I definitely need some time to decompress because when I am working with clients in the studio or whether I'm mixing, I am also intensely focused on and whatever I'm doing, and I'm a detail oriented guy, so I get really sort of like into it, and that takes a lot of energy, and so I am a little bit drained at the end of the day, admittedly.
Sure,
Yeah,
understandable. I'm
yeah.
sure I would be as well. Sometimes it's hard to turn your brain off.
This is true, and I've gotten better at that, honestly. I'm working on energy management. I actually am engaged in a course right now that deals with that, and uh, I can get into more of that if you like. But basically, what I'm trying to do is um, they have something called the one third rule, where you're supposed to have one third of your day in time in your business where you're actually billing your clients, you're doing, recording, you're mixing, like the nuts and bolts of your business. One third that's time on, which means you're working on marketing or strategy, or you're emailing people about, or you're scheduling sessions, like things like that. And then time off is the other third, where you're supposed to actually recharge and take some time for yourself, whether that be taking a walk, meditation, um, what have you, whatever allows you to totally disconnect. And I'll be honest, one third of my day to be disconnected is a tall order with the number of clients that I have that are waiting for projects. So it's tough to do, but it's really important because what I've found and what they teach and what I've found to be true is that if you just try to squeeze every ounce of juice out of the orange, every day, you're probably going to burn out at some point. And I've certainly been there. I've been known to push, into deadlines, and I'm not interested in doing that anymore. I want to, set reasonable expectations and then come back fresh, after a break. And my ears are fresh, my mind is clear, and then I can really do my best work for my clients.
Sure. I'm sure a lot of people can identify with that too, in whatever their field of work or discipline is, and juggling family life and having trying to have a personal life and all those things too. It's life is certainly a balancing act for many Americans.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
here's a question for you from a historical perspective. Actually, it's a two-parter. So
Yeah.
I know you've been recording and doing your thing for a long time, and I was kind of curious, at what early young age did you first get the bug of wanting to sit behind a console and tweak knobs, or just record any sounds, number one, and number two, at any point throughout your evolution and development, have you done or had any interest in doing live sound?
Okay. So part one, I started dabbling with this at a very young age, actually. I can remember, I think I was probably 7 or 8, and without really knowing anything about the technology, I figured out how to overdub myself playing. So I had a Radio Shack tape cassette recorder, um, and I recorded myself playing guitar, and then I decided that I was going to take that recorder, hit play, and then I had another cassette recorder that my dad had, and I hit record on that. So I'm playing these tape recorders had speakers built into them, right? So it
Sure.
wasn't connected. You remember these? It
I
wasn't
remember.
connected directly by a wire, cable or anything. So I'm playing, my guitar part into the air. It's being captured by the tiny little, mic in the other tape recorder, and I'm singing over it. And that was my first multi-track recording using two, you know, crappy Radio Shack tape cassette recorders. And I think I was about maybe 7 or 8 when I did that. Um, I moved on in high school. I got very into multi-track recording. I had an actual, decent like Yamaha 4-track recorder where you could mix and add, you had outboard effects and things like that. Still cassette format, and recorded my first album that way. I remember, so I started out not looking to be a producer or engineer, but I wanted to be an artist. And so I played piano, I played guitar, I wrote songs, and I sang. Although I was shy, and my parents didn't actually had never really heard me sing. So one weekend I told them, "Listen, I'm gonna be in my bedroom for the whole weekend. I'm locking the door. Don't interrupt me. Don't ask for me. I will come out when I'm ready to see you or take breaks or whatever." And I recorded my first album, multi-track, with keys and guitars, drum, like a drum machine kind of thing, and vocals, and bounced the old bouncing of tracks, which was basically you could get more tracks by running one into another, into another, into another. And my mom was getting some catching some rays in on the back deck, and I was in my bedroom, and she heard this voice. She told me later she heard this voice coming from the house, and she had no idea what it was. And then she was like, "Is that Dave?" And then I had this album that I presented to them, and it was my first recording project, and they were like, "What?" So those were my humble beginnings.
Have you listened to that recording at any time in recent years?
Oh yeah, yeah. I actually had it. This is dating me a little bit too. I I had a family friend who worked in New York City at a professional recording studio, and they did a lot of jingles and things like that. But I sent him the cassette, and he mastered it onto a DAT. I don't know if you remember digital audio tape.
I sure do. I have a
Yeah.
few.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. So he put it on DAT, and from there I was able to transfer it digitally without any signal loss to CD, and I made a bunch of CDs, and I still have the CD. So in fact, the other night I was just in my COVID-19, sort of hibernation. At night I was just like, I feel like I just want to play guitar for myself, and just enjoy it, as opposed to just, playing on someone's track, and because I do play on a lot of the tracks I produce. And I started playing one of the songs off that album, and I hadn't played it in 25 years. So it was kind of cool. So it's still there.
Nice.
It's still there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. I love when, finding those things or uncovering them and checking them out once in a while or once every few years or 5 years or whatever is always really fun.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Cool. So what about live sound? Did that ever turn you on? Ever any interest in doing that?
I've done live sound in the sense that I always used to play gigs and run my own sound. But I've never been interested in being sort of a house engineer for any venues. It's not really compatible for me with the studio world. You kind of have to pick one or the other just because of the nature of the beast, the hours. I think I could, fill that role if I needed to, but I actually enjoy more of the creation process in the studio and the writing of songs, arranging. Um, I enjoy producing and engineering. Pretty much they're on par as far as what I enjoy about what I do. But I think that is pure engineering. And so I would be missing out on some of the things I love about the studio world.
Sure.
Um, and also just like the direct connection you have when you're working with artists and bands. You're a little more removed. So it's not really something that I'm pursuing, but I have done some of it, and certainly have been known to, uh, people on stage who know me are like, "Hey, Dave, how are the levels? What would you do?" And I'm just like helping him out. I even ran. My wife jokes that I ran sound at our wedding. we had we
Nice.
had we had friends who were, most of my friends at this point are either former clients or they're colleagues of mine from the music community. So of course I had some of them play in our ceremony, um, and I I was like, we need a little more reverb on this. So my wife's
More
like, oh
reverb.
God, could you focus on me for one day?
It's yeah, just one day of all days,
Just one day.
right?
Anyway, yeah. So
Well, you have such a fantastic facility now too, where if I were pursuing a path in recording or engineering or producing or whatever, I mean, who wouldn't want to have that the kind of facility and the things at your fingertips or your disposal at your disposal, um, that you can work with and improve on and be comfortable with every single day and know what you're getting into, as opposed to not knowing what you're going to get every night. That's a different animal, I think. So
for sure. Um, it was interesting when I built the new studio. I actually had to learn my own studio for for quite a while. I was feeling almost like a stranger in my own studio because there were so many new tools and so many different connections and routings and all this. And that was an interesting process. But once I got my arms around it, I appreciated all of the detail, the flexibility that we built into it. The Ethernet audio tie lines, the video communication in every room. We've got cameras and video monitors for communication, and the hearback system, customizing headphone mixes, all that stuff. You know, it was a leaps and bounds over what I had before, and I had to learn it for myself. But once I did, it becomes just like second nature. It's like you just reach this knob and you know what that piece of gear is going to sound like. And I'm constantly upgrading, but I think that the core of what I've got is it feels very very comfortable now, and I can work
sure.
more efficiently than ever before.
Does Innovation Station, in your thought or mind, have any particular or distinctive kind of sound or feel to it? Meaning, is there an identifiable kind of quality to the music and the sounds that you capture there that someone out there could go, oh, that must have been done at Innovation Station. That's Dave Mallen's work. I just know it. Is it like that at all?
There isn't a sonic signature from the room per se, and that was by design. We designed the room to be controlled in terms of reflections, and there's very little actual room reverb, because for one reason, it allows you to then season to taste. So once you're starting with a very controlled, sort of, it's not completely dry, but it doesn't have it doesn't have a lot of ambience, and that allows you to dial in whatever room you want. I mean, there are room, whether it's impulse responses, convolution reverbs, or you've got these room simulations from Universal Audio like Ocean Way and the Capitol Studios chambers. I mean, you can really create this space. Abbey Road has done this, and I've got the Abbey Road plugins. So you can put your drum kit or your whole band in a space like Abbey Road, and And so that level of flexibility was more appealing to me than having one particular sound. And the other thing is that I would say when people hear tracks that I've done, it's more about either the things that I've played and my style and sensibility of arranging and performing, say, like a piano part. They're like, oh, yeah, I can tell that was done by Dave. And then if I haven't played on the tracks, people can sometimes identify my mixes based on the level of clarity. The feedback I get most often is that there's no muddiness. Every instrument has its own sort of defined space and clarity, and I put a lot of effort into making sure that that happens. So my mixes tend to be um, sonically very pure and clear. So
Sure.
that's what I would say to that. Yeah,
You made me think of something. You want to hear a revealing piece of musician nerdery that I can share with you?
absolutely.
So, shortly after I got out of college, I had announced to my parents that I was going to move to Los Angeles so I could make it as a musician, which they weren't having at all. They weren't buying this. That was not their idea of what I was going to be doing.
Right.
But I went out there. They actually paid for me to go out there, and I spent a week and I stayed with a friend of mine who was out there working for Disney at the time. And so he's going to work every day, lends me his car. So I cruise around all day for 5 days around LA, just like scoping out neighborhoods and fantasizing about what it would be like if I were to live there and being working musician there. I made a point of driving by as many studios that I knew of, that I knew where particular records were recorded, because I was so enamored with what must have gone on inside those walls. So I drove by Ocean Way, I drove by Village Recorders, Sound City, all those places. I was like, wow, I wonder who's in there now. I mean, I was so over the top with, one day I'm going to get in those doors, man. But
Yeah.
I didn't. But it was still fun.
Sure. Sure.
So to that end, from a locale perspective, I know you've been super duper active in the community here,
Mhm.
and I mentioned that in my intro as well about your involvement in the community and knowing a lot of people and everything. What's your general take on the music community here and the musicians that are here and the kind of talent that's in the greater DC area?
Yeah. So I've been part of the music community in the DC area for something around 20 years. 25 years. God, that's
Wow.
crazy. And I've played in, blues bands, and I've had a solo acoustic singer-songwriter career, and then I've had, I played bar gigs that were, through an agency, playing covers, and obviously I've done the studio thing, and I feel like I've seen a lot over that span of time, quarter century, whatever. Um, my sense is that there's a lot of talent in the area, but the fact that we have Maryland, D.C., and Virginia, um, with a river, in the middle, um, it often creates an unnecessary barrier, and there's also some fragmentation just due to I think the nature of there's so many different genres. It used to be, in certain eras, you had a sort of a coalescence of uh, of a scene. Like, there was a pretty big folk scene in the '60s, and then you had, the punk scene in the '80s. There, back in the day, there was a lot of jazz and there was soul. I mean, I think you've seen these things emerge as movements in DC, but at the moment there isn't one. I mean, you've got go-go, which has always been
Sure.
a through line through all of it. But my sense is that one hand isn't always talking to the other. As I've been to conferences that talk about DC as a music city, And there are people who are working on this, who are trying to communicate to our elected leaders in the area that music is a driver for the economy, that the nighttime economy is critically important and needs to be funded and needs to be, regulations need to support that and get out of the way of allowing that to happen. Unfortunately, too many things have happened that have thwarted those efforts. The metro, and being closed at midnight, the noise ordinances in DC that sometimes come into play. Um, I'm thinking about parking has become harder than ever in DC and more expensive. And then you've got new venues opening up in like the Southwest waterfront, but it's $26 to park, or maybe it's even more right now. So
Right.
it a lot of people just don't even bother. So I could go on and on and on about sort of the conditions that are present that make it difficult for a free flow of travel and an ease of making a living as a musician. So I feel like the people who have really been successful and make it, as you were saying, they tend to move away, and they move to Nashville, they move to LA. Not to say that they're making it necessarily, but they're finding an infrastructure that supports them that DC doesn't quite have. And so um, my my goal with Metro Music Source and through the consulting work that I do through Innovation Station Music is really to educate and get people to unify, learn from each other, and sort of create this community that we can all sort of leverage each other and and rise together. Because I do think there's a lot of talent. I know there's a lot of talent. It's incredible. It just, and we're a capital of the U.S. Like we definitely we suffer a little bit from the transient nature of DC. I would say that that applies not only to the artists, but it also applies to the fans. I mean, I think it's, there's a lot of hardworking people that at the end of a long day working, on the Hill or as an attorney, or I don't mean to, generalize about the
Sure.
people who work in DC, but I think, it's generally a white collar town with a lot of hardworking career people who sometimes move here because of their jobs. And so that's their primary driver for being here, unless you grew up here. And for those people, you've got to have a compelling reason to then pick yourself up and go see a band you've never heard. So there are a lot of, I think there's a lot that needs to happen where musicians need to partner with venues and really sort of collaborate on the marketing and find a way to reach people like that. And it's a tough situation with the transient nature, but I think the talent is undeniable, undeniable. So it's why I have decided to plant my roots here and not move to Nashville and not move to LA, but to keep my institutional knowledge here and keep investing in the local scene.
That sounds fantastic. I love what you're doing, and all those reasons that you cited resonate. I'm sure those factors and reasons resonate with a lot of people. I've seen some of the same things as well. I'm always blown away by the talent, like the level of talent by musicians and artists individually and collectively is super high, and it's very inspiring. But we've all encountered some of those challenges or barriers or roadblocks that you kind of talked about to having an infrastructure where everybody could do their thing in a more free-flowing fashion. I mean, when I play a gig in DC, I budget in a parking ticket. I just do. I budget in a parking ticket, or to your point, 25 or $30 to park. That kind of comes with the territory.
Yeah.
But certainly from a talent perspective, it's always inspiring and encouraging. So, but I love what you're doing on all that stuff. It's admirable, and I'm glad that you're here. And I think the facility that you have is pristine and beautiful.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So we're sort of in wind down mode. The show we're doing is 30 minutes of truth, and we're coming up on the 30-minute mark. So to that end, any closing thoughts, ideas, things you'd like to share, get out there to the world about Innovation Station? I know you're obviously online with the website and Facebook and social media and all that kind of good stuff. Any other things that people might want to know about Innovation Station that isn't already known?
Well, I mentioned earlier the this course that I'm doing that involves some energy management approaches, and it's really a course for what they call highly sensitive entrepreneurs. And I'm going to sort of out myself here as an HSE, um, because I think that whereas a lot of the studios kind of have a very impressive, mixing board and a great space, and they've been around, and you know, you get good sound. I think what sets me apart, um, and why people choose to work with me, have chosen to work with me over the years, is because I have a particular sensitivity to them as people, to their musical sensibilities, my attention to detail. When we talk about highly sensitive, it's not a negative thing. Although highly sensitive people can tend towards perfectionism and sort of overwhelm if you push too much, to try to get that perfect take or whatever. But that's what I'm working on. But I think it's like 90% of the time it's of benefit to myself and to my clients, because I am never going to let a take go by where I'm not going to give you very specific coaching on how you can be better and inspire you to be better. I'm never going to allow anything lackluster to pass through the studio here if I can help it. And so I want to get the very best out of my clients. How do I do that? I develop a very deep personal relationship with them from day one, and that is the empathetic, intuitive nature that I have, that I bring to the table. A lot of my sessions end up being almost therapeutic for people, and they come in weekly, and it's way cheaper than going to a therapist, and they get to express themselves in a very safe space. I keep the space very clean. It's professional. Everything I've thought about everything in advance, all the creature comforts, everything's where they need it to be in terms of, they need drinks and they need this. And when people feel like they're taken care of, and you're listening to them and you give them real insightful feedback, they trust you, and then they can open up and they can deliver the very best performances. And that is the underpinning. Good songs, good performances are the two most important things in making great records. Because all of my gear is, top notch, and, other studios have a lot of the same gear. The difference for me is that I bring that sort of experience, that personalized experience to the table. And, I'll be honest, for a while I was trying to hide that, because I wanted to just be sort of, this is me, this is the wall between us. And now I'm just all out there, and it really resonates with people. So if you're interested in that type of experience, my studio, innovationstationmusic.com, you can check out the website. You can hear samples that I've done. You can read my bio, and I'm interested in working with like-minded individuals. I'm interested in working with people who get that, who would appreciate that. And if not, I'll happily send you to I have friends at all the other studios, so I'm happy to refer you to those studios. But that's what's special about what I do and what I bring to the table. I think it's worth mentioning.
That sounds fantastic. Yeah, it sounds like a place I'd like to go record at. So
Yeah,
who
man.
knows? We'll see what can happen after we're all allowed to go out of our houses for more than groceries.
Amen.
So, Dave, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to sit down and talk with us. I know you've always got a lot going on, and I know you're staying busy throughout this period of time. So, really do appreciate the time. It's fun to learn about what you're doing and what's going on at the studio, and I'm really glad we got to do this.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to reconnect and to do the interview. So, best of luck to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, you too.